Oh, okay, so now the recording is going, and today is, wow, December 18th, 2021. How did this time go so quickly? Okay, so we begin with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then we do the salutation to the Buddha again 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Again, the second time, good morning. And now we'll be continuing with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours. And we now come to Sutta number 195. And this sutta is somewhat interesting from a historical point of view, rather than an immediately practical point of view, because it deals with an important difference between the position of the Jains and the Buddha and the Buddhists. You know, we see, and I've noticed this so often in the text, that when the Buddha is speaking about the Brahmins or in conversation with the Brahmins, even though he criticizes certain doctrines of the Brahmins, particularly the Brahmin attitude toward imposition, attempts to impose a caste system on the culture of the society of the time. But when it comes to doctrinal issues, the Buddha is somewhat on friendly terms with the Brahmins. But when it comes to the Jains, the texts become sometimes a bit, maybe use the word acerbic, somewhat sharp and sharply critical, because the Buddhists and the Jains were very close, both geographically and in their way of life, and in some respects in doctrine, but there were important differences between them with respect to doctrine and also with regard to the practice. So it seems that the Jains followed the old Indian tradition of extreme ascetic, emphasis on ascetic practices, extreme austerities. And they saw the practice of extreme self-mortification to be the path to liberation. And so the ideal practice for a Jain ascetic is actually to entirely refrain from food until one starves oneself to death. So that is the mark of a fully accomplished Jain ascetic. Another kind of Jain practice, that was a practice that was extolled and adopted by the Jains, was to remain standing in one place without ever moving for maybe days on end, maybe until the body collapsed. And so when the Buddha set out on his own quest for enlightenment, originally some of the practices that he adopted, though it's not specifically said so, but they were practices that might have been promoted and propagated by the Jains. But the Buddha himself found that they did not lead to true realization and enlightenment. And so what the Buddha discovered was what he called the Majjhima Patipada, the middle way, the way that avoids, on the one hand, the indulgence in sensual pleasures, which is the way of ordinary people, and then the practice of Attakila Matanu Yoga, which is this practice of self-mortification, of self-affliction, which was the common practice amongst the Indian ascetics of the time, and which was particularly exemplified by the Jains. Today, I think the Jains, on the whole, are much more moderate in their practice than the Jains of ancient times. But even in India today, there are two sects of Jains, if any of you have personal acquaintance of this. One is called the Saitambara. Saitambara means those who wear white clothing. So those Jain ascetics wear white robes. And of course, they will wear a mask over the face. I mean, they didn't need any government mandates to wear a face mask, but throughout history, they've worn the face mask so that they don't inhale accidentally, unintentionally, any insects or other types of small living beings and risk killing them by inhaling them. So that's one sect of the Jains. The other sect is called the Digambara, which means literally those who have the sky for their clothing. And those are the Jains who observe complete nudity. They don't wear any clothing at all. Probably the great majority of the Jain ascetics today will be practitioners belong to the Saitambara sect, wearing the white robes. But there are still communities of the Digambara, the naked Jain ascetics. In fact, yeah, this was 2.5 years ago, I was in India in Sanat, where the Buddha gave the first sermon. And right next to the deer park, there is a Jain monastery, and it's a monastery belonging to the Digambara sect. And when I was there, I went just to look in to see what it was like. And there was a custodian who was not a monastic, a lay custodian. And we didn't see any of the Jain ascetics moving about, but I spoke a bit to the custodian, and he showed me some pictures. He had like a collection of photographs, and it showed some of the Jain ascetics from that temple with prime ministers of India. And of course, the prime minister or the president, or other state officials are wearing the normal clothing, and the Jain ascetic is standing next to them in the photograph, completely naked. I imagine that when Jains come to other countries in order to establish temples for the Jain followers in, say, Europe or North America, it's generally, I think, invariably it will be the Saitambara, the white-robed Jain ascetics who come. Otherwise, I can't see. I can't see the naked ascetics waiting to get their ticket confirmed at the airport, and to go. They won't have any trouble going through security since there's nothing to be checked. And then if they have to sit down next to somebody, there's a vacant seat on the plane. you see a naked Jain ascetic sit down next to you on the plane. Okay, so anyway, let us come to the sutta. And so the sutta opens now. This is when the Buddha is living amongst his own community, his own natural clan, the Sakyans, at the capital of the Sakyans, which is Kapilavatthu, in the park called the Banyan Tree Park. Okay, then a certain member of the Sakyan clan comes to the Venerable Mahamoggallana. Mahamoggallana was the second chief disciple of the Buddha, the one who excelled in psychic powers. And the Sakyan who comes to him, named Vappa, is described as a disciple of the Nigantas. And the Nigantas is just the term that the Buddhist texts use for the Jains. The word Jain itself is a derivative of the word Jina. Yes, you see the word Jain here. And it's derived from the word Jina, which means the conqueror or the victorious one, the one who has conquered all the defilements and who is victorious in the struggle for liberation. And so the Buddha, for the Buddhists actually, the Buddha is called, in some texts, called the Jina. And so the Buddhists would not refer to the Jains as Jaina because the Buddhists themselves considered themselves to be followers of the conqueror, but their Jina, their conqueror, was not the teacher of the Jains, but the Buddha himself. And historically, the Jina is said to have been, the Buddhist texts refer to him as the Niganta. Not a Puta. He's also known historically to the Jains as Mahavira. Mahavira means the great Vira, hero, the great hero. But for the Buddhists, of course, the Buddha is the Mahavira, the great hero. And then according to the commentary to the sutta, this particular Sakyan, Vappa, was the Buddha's uncle, I think the younger brother of his father. Okay, so now this Vappa comes to Moggallana and probably they're having some conversation and he asks some questions to Moggallana, and Moggallana says that if one is restrained by body, speech, and mind, then with the fading away of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge. So this indicates sort of the aim of the Buddhist, the practice of the Buddhist path, to extinguish ignorance and to give rise to, well, all knowledge is true. Let's say clear knowledge, liberating knowledge. Then he says, do you see anything, any reason why taints productive of painful feeling might flow in upon such a person in future lives? Okay, now from this Buddhist standpoint, when one reaches the fading away of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge, then with that true knowledge, one extinguishes all of the taints or the asavas. That is the important Pali word, asavas. And with the destruction of the asavas, there are no future lives. It's the ending of the cycle of repeated birth and death, the end of samsaric becoming. So I think Moggallana is trying to extract from Vappa the admission that when you eliminate ignorance and acquire this true knowledge, then one destroys the taints and one is free from repeated existence. But Vappa doesn't concur with Moggallana on this matter. So he says that he sees that there is such a possibility. And then he says, in the past, one did an evil deed whose result has not yet ripened. On that account, taints productive of painful feeling might flow in upon a person in some future life. Now, this statement from Vappa, first, it also uses the word taints. And the Pali word here, the Pali word is asava. And this was a word that was in currency and circulation among the Indian spiritual communities, even before the rise of the Buddha. So even though the Buddha made the idea of the asavas, these, call it these primordial defilements, one of the main concepts in his teaching, so that the goal for the Buddha's practitioner is asava kaya, the elimination of the asavas, which is equivalent to arhatship or vimutti, liberation. But the Buddha didn't originate the word asava, but he took it over from the other ascetic groups, and it was also a key concept in the Jain teaching. But for the Jains, the asava, the idea of asava had a somewhat different meaning than it did for the Buddha. For the Buddha, the asavas are these, what I call primordial defilements. And we have the three asavas of sensual craving, craving for repeated existence, and ignorance. But the Jains use the word asava in a more literal sense of sort of karmic residues that flow in upon the jiva. The jiva is the soul, and they taint the soul. So the jiva is the living entity of the soul, which was a concept of the Jains. And the asavas are these kind of residues of past karma that flow in, kind of material, almost like a material substance that covers over and obstructs and defiles the soul. And so the objective, I had to really ponder this sutta, over some time to see exactly what the point that's being made here by Vappa. And the point that I came to see is that for the Jains, to gain liberation, you have to eliminate all one's past karma. As long as there's karma that's not yet eliminated, one cannot be liberated. As long as there is karma that is not yet eliminated, one cannot be liberated. And so, according to Vappa, who seems to be quite knowledgeable about the Jain teaching, even if one gains this, eliminates ignorance and gains this true knowledge, as long as one has not eliminated the past evil karma, that past karma will still have the opportunity to ripen. And when that karma ripens, then it will maintain the continuity of existence and is capable of producing painful feelings in a future life. So the way, after reflecting on this sutta and another one that we might look at, I came to see the difference between the Jain position and the Buddhist position. So for the Jains, in order to be freed from suffering and from samsara and from suffering, one has to destroy, eliminate all past karma. And as long as past karma remains, that karma can ripen, and it can trigger the asava, which will then flow in and can bring along painful feeling in the future. Whereas the Buddha's position is that one doesn't destroy all past karma. Rather, what one does, maybe I should fill this out. Yeah, what one does is to eliminate ignorance and gives rise to correct, accurate knowledge. And then one doesn't create new karma, and one will wear away whatever past karma has the opportunity to ripen by observing it, contemplating it with wisdom. So I think this will emerge from the discussion. Okay, so now as Moggallana is conversing with Vappa the second, the Buddha comes out from seclusion and he goes to the attendance hall and he sits down, and then he asks Moggallana, what was the discussion that you were having right just now? Apparently Vappa and Moggallana are in the attendance hall. Well, that would be like the lecture hall. And then Moggallana relays the conversation. And then the Buddha is now going to take up the discussion with Vappa the second. Again, Vappa could well be his own uncle. And then before the Buddha starts to converse with Vappa, this is quite an interesting way in which the Buddha opens the discussion. So I gave special highlight. I highlighted this. So he says to Vappa, if you would admit, recognize, acknowledge what should be admitted, and reject what should be rejected, and if when you don't understand the meaning of my words, you would ask me about them, saying, how is this, and so on, then we might have some discussion. And I think this point is really particularly relevant to some of the issues that we're facing right now in the United States, in the way different sides have discussions with each other about heated issues, hot topics, whether it might be issues like voting rights or the COVID pandemic or climate change. So, often now one side, when the other side is bringing forth like scientific evidence or good arguments, they won't admit what should be admitted, and they won't reject what should be rejected, but either they go on just blindly and insisting on their own point of view, or else they quote questionable authorities, referring to websites that are promoting conspiracy theories. And then they maintain that their position is just as valid as the other position. We just had a revelation of that this past week when in this January 6th commission, when it was discovered that some of the Fox News commentators had sent messages to Mark Meadows, former President Trump's chief of staff, please tell the president to stop that. This was this January 6th insurrection. It's looking bad. It's ruining his legacy. He's casting us in a bad light. So they knew that it was the Trump supporters who were launching that attack on the Capitol. But then when they came on air, they were saying that this is the work of Antifa. It's the Antifa who's causing this commotion at the Capitol, or it's the agents of the FBI who have instigated this attack on the Capitol. And so they won't admit what should be admitted or reject what should be rejected. Okay, so this is the way the Buddha, let's come back to the 500 BC. Okay, so, so now the Buddha sort of lays out the condition for holding a discussion, and Vappa agrees to those conditions. Okay, so now the Buddha is going to bring up his own position, and it's a bit puzzling to me. I'm not sure that I completely understand this. So he says, first, so what do you think? Those taints, distressing and feverish, that might arise because of bodily undertakings, do not occur when one refrains from them, when one refrains from bodily undertakings. Yeah, and the commentary just explains bodily undertakings as bodily karma, bodily activities. Okay, so it seems almost, if you take this literally, that the text is sort of seems a little bit to upholding. You see, the Jain idea was to avoid creating karma. One doesn't engage in any activity. And of course, it's almost impossible to avoid all activity. So what the Jain ascetic tries to do is to reduce activities to the minimum. And so the ideal, again, is just to remain standing or sitting in one place without moving, not even taking any food, to completely avoid all activity. But the Buddha does not enjoin, doesn't require avoiding all bodily activity, but rather what the Buddha says is to avoid bodily misconduct, impure conduct through of the body or through the body. And so it's a bit strange. Maybe my translation of undertakings doesn't correctly capture the meaning of the Pali word, which is not a very common word. The word used is saramba. Okay, then the Buddha continues, he does not create any new karma, and he terminates the old karma, having contacted it again and again. It seems here, now it seems to me that what the Buddha is describing is the behavior maybe of the arahant, because an ordinary person, even a devoted disciple, an earnest disciple on the path, will be creating karma through their practice of the path, though it would be wholesome karma, good karma. But here he's speaking about refraining from bodily undertakings. So this must be refraining from bodily transgressions or bodily misconduct. And then it would be only the arhat who through his activities doesn't create any new karma. And then he terminates the old karma, having contacted it again and again. And then I put a note here. Okay, actually the note is in Pali, but I think I have the translation in the footnote. Yeah, so this is what the Pali of the commentary means. Having contacted the karma again and again by contact with knowledge, he destroys the karma that to be eliminated by means of knowledge. And having contacted the result and again by resultant contact, he destroys the karma to be eliminated by experiencing the result. I'm not so sure that I agree completely with the commentary here. This is the way I would understand this, that this in fact is describing the Arahant who doesn't create any new karma, but the Arhat is not immune or exempt from experiencing the results, the ripening of old karma, karma that was created from earlier in this life or in earlier lives. So even the Buddha experienced, he got ill from time to time. He had a persistent backache or sometimes even a headache. And he got injured by an attack on him by his cousin Devadatta. And so he had to experience sharp and painful feelings that is said was also the result of old karma. And some of the like arhats like Angulimala, who had killed, murdered hundreds of people, and then became a monk and attained arhatship, and he was beaten by people when they recognized him as Angulimala. And so that old karma done before from the past will ripen, but one puts an end to that karma, one sort of lets it run its course, lets it ripen by contacting it again or by experiencing it again and again. So one just endures that karma with patience, and one could actually use insight or wisdom to contemplate the painful feelings that arise through the ripening of that karma. Or if it's good karma that's ripening, it could be pleasant feelings. And so we'll contact the pleasant feelings. But because one applies wisdom or insight, one doesn't yield to craving or attachment to the pleasant feelings and aversion or distress because of the painful feelings. And so here the Buddha, and this is interesting, he uses one of the key doctrinal terms of the Jains, which was wearing away. For the Jains, what one does is inflict the body with pain and suffering through these extreme ascetic practices in order to cause the old karma to ripen, to arise. And one keeps on inflicting the body with suffering, sort of to stir up the old karma, to give it the chance to ripen, with the thought that eventually, through the painful austerities, one will eliminate all the old karma accumulated from the past. And the Jains call that the wearing away of that karma. Yeah, the term in Pali is nijara. So that was the ideal for the Jains. And the Buddha is here because he's speaking with Vapa, who's a follower of the Jains. He adopts that term and he says that this wearing away is directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. And then he says, do you see anything on account of which taints productive of painful feeling might flow in upon such a person in future lives? And Vapa says, no. Okay, then the Buddha poses the same questions now in terms of verbal undertakings. And again, I would have to understand this as verbal transgressions that one refrains from, and then mental undertakings or mental transgressions. And then the fourth case, the Buddha brings up with the fading away of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge, those taints distressing and feverish that arise with ignorance as condition no longer occur. So this is now sort of directly and explicitly indicating the achievement of the Arahat. And then he asks whether Then he says he does not create any new karma, and he terminates the old karma, having contacted again and again. And then he says, do you see anything on account of which taints productive of painful feelings might flow in upon him? And again, the answer is no. Okay, so now the Buddha continues now. So with this last question, he's come back to the original point that Mahamoggallana had made. But when Mahamoggallana made this point, Vappa refused to accept it, but he insisted that there's still the possibility that old karma that is not yet ripened might have the chance to ripen, and then taints productive of painful feeling might arise. But now, after going through that course of questioning, the Buddha gets Vappa to admit that there's no possibility now that the taints productive of painful feeling might arise. Okay, now the Buddha is going to describe what is called the constant abiding or constant dwelling of the Arahant, the one who is perfectly liberated in mind. And these are called the 6 constant dwellings with respect to the 6 sense faculties. So having seen a form with the eye, sometimes one sees agreeable, likable forms, sometimes one sees disagreeable, repulsive forms, but whatever one sees with the eye, the Arhat perceives it without experiencing joy. That's joy that indicates the presence of attachment or craving, and without sadness or displeasure, indicating the presence of aversion. So he's free from craving and aversion, liking and disliking with regard to whatever is seen with the eye. And instead, he dwells contemplating those forms with equanimity, mindful, and with sampajanya, with clear comprehension. And the same with sounds, odors, tastes, tactile sensations, and with mental phenomena. Through all 6 senses, he maintains this unshakable equanimity, mindful, and with clear comprehension. Okay, so this is one way of describing the sort of the constant experience, the sensory experience of the Arhat, the one liberated in mind, with respect to the 6 sense bases. And now continuing, the Buddha says, when he experiences a feeling, and he uses a rather cryptic term here, a feeling terminating with the body, he understands, I experience a feeling terminating with the body. And when he feels or experiences a feeling terminating with life, he understands, I experience a feeling terminating with life. And then he understands with the breakup of the body, following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, all feeling, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. And these phrases, these expressions are very, very compressed, very, maybe you could say, rich in meaning, but we need some explanation to draw out the meaning. Let me see if this note is helpful. Yeah, basically the point is that the Arhat knows that his feelings continue only as long as the body continues, only as long as the life force continues, and that with the perishing of the body and with the end of vitality, the exhaustion of the life force, all feelings will come to an end. course, elsewhere the Buddha teaches that whatever is felt, all feeling is included in dukkha, whether it's pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or the neutral feeling, neither painful nor pleasant. All that feeling is in some way unsatisfactory, um, unable to give perfect satisfaction. And so when experiences this feeling through the body, one understands that one will continue to experience feelings with the body only as long as this body, this is the last body, the antima sarira, the final body that the arhat is bearing. So he knows that I'm experiencing this feeling only as long as the body lasts. And similarly, he understands I'm experiencing this feeling only as long as the life force continues. And with the breakup of the body and the exhaustion of the life force, then all feeling is going to come to an end, to become cool right here. Because all feeling is, in the Indian way of thinking, is a kind of fever, a kind of intense heat. And so probably because of the hot climate, and so the ideal for the Indian is to experience coolness. And so nibbana itself is, the word nibbana itself is the going out of the flames. Yeah, the word nibbana is derived from, oops. It's from the verb va, which means to blow, and nir, which has the sense of out. So nirvana is the act of the going out of a flame, the extinction of a flame. And so it's understood as a state of coolness. So sometimes nirvana is sort of glows to siti bhava, the state of coolness. And becoming cool, I think we have the Pali here. Yeah, becoming cool is siti bhavisanti, will become cool. Okay, then to illustrate this, we have a simile. And so the Buddha says, suppose there's a stump of a tree, and is casting a shadow. So the shadow was seen on account of the stump, and then a man comes along with a shovel and a basket, and he digs up the stump, even pulls up the little roots, and he cuts up the stump into pieces, reduces them to slivers, burns them in a fire, reduces them to ashes, and then he discards the ashes. And so in that case, the shadow that depended on that stump would be eliminated. When there's no stump, then there's no shadow of the stump. And since the stump has been completely reduced to ashes, and the ashes have been scattered, there's no possibility that that shadow could arise again in the future. The commentary gives one detailed explanation of that, which I indicated in the note, but I don't quite agree with the commentary here. I think the simpler explanation is that the feeling occurs dependent on the body, and the body infused with vitality. So that living body is like the stump, and the feelings are like the shadows. And so with the attainment of the final Nibbana, this is the unupadisesa Nibbana dhatu, the Nibbana with no residue remaining, then there's no more arising of feeling. Yeah, so actually that reminds me, we could make the distinction here that this passage, or this sentence, or these two sentences show, or actually even the previous paragraph, the 6 constant dwellings and this understanding. This shows what is called the sa-upadisesa Nibbana dhatu, the element of Nibbana with a residue remaining. And then this sentence is showing that when, with the breakup of the body following the exhaustion of life, everything becoming cool, that shows the Nibbana without residue remaining. So that is the state of final or ultimate liberation. Okay, so then we have then the Buddha just repeats the same passage to fill out the simile. And then when the Buddha finishes speaking, again, here we have a little sort of an advertisement for the Buddhists as against the Jains. So it's a little bit like when somebody has been using a PC computer and then they're shown an Apple computer, then they throw away their PC and they say, now I'm going to use the Apple computer, never again a PC computer. So when this was said, then Vapa the Sakyan now says, suppose there was a man in quest of profit who raised horses for sale, but he wouldn't get a profit from the horses and instead would only become weary and distressed. Just so, in quest of profit, I attended upon the foolish Nigantas, but I did not gain any profit, but only weariness and distress. So now, whatever confidence I had in the foolish Nigantas, I winnow that in a strong wind or let it be carried away by the current of a river. And now I place my trust in the Buddha. Then he declares that he goes for refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and asks the Buddha to consider him as a lay follower for the rest of his life. Okay, so that is our sutta. And maybe we could take any questions. And some parts, I have to confess, are not perfectly clear to me. But we'll try, maybe we could try to untangle some of the obscure points together. Okay, I see V.
Yes, Bante, good morning. I have this question because this Vapa, I would suspect that he is not a Sotapanna yet.
Oh, no,
and
he's
that,
at this point, he's a follower of the Jain. So
yep.
go on.
So in this sense, say, for example, one is getting angry. You have the mental phenomenon, which is anger. So how do we contemplate to extinguish the fire in the sense that we knew that from our sixth sense door, from our eye or from say a mental object that we are angry, we know the cause,
Yeah,
we know the condition, and we
yeah,
saw it arising, and that it stays for a while and it decaying and ceasing. So we contemplate in terms of non-self, impermanence, and could Bhante give some guidance? Because sometimes the angle, the same object continue to pop up after a while, and that
Yeah.
you try to extinguish it, and that it pop up again, and that how to actually subside, make it subsiding. Could Bhante give
Yeah, of course,
some
there are
guidance?
different techniques to use depending upon what, let's say, what the object is. And I say that there has to be generally a difference of approach, whether one is dealing with people or with circumstances, with conditions. By the way, do you get some noise coming through? It sounds like there's some vehicle outside. Oh, probably it's the one that provides the fuel. Okay, never mind.
No.
Okay, depending on whether it's a person or or conditions. So if it's a person that's causing the anger to arise, then there are, again, one battery of techniques to overcome that anger. And some of the techniques that are taught in the suttas to either develop loving kindness towards that person who's provoking the anger, or if the person is in a bad state of mind, to develop compassion towards them, or to develop equanimity towards that person, not to be disturbed by that person. And that reminds me of a story that I heard. It comes from the famous Thai master Ajahn Chah. Long ago, like he was teaching his students how not to be upset and distressed by people who are provoking them and causing trouble for them. And he gives the example, like suppose you're walking down a street and there's somebody on the other side of the street and he calls out to you, hey, you idiot, you're a fool, you're a dumbbell, you're worthless. So when you turn and you hear that person, then you become angry. Why is he yelling at me? Let me go over and yell at him or give him a punch. So you become angry and upset with him. But then just when you're about to cross the street, another person comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, don't pay any attention to him. He's crazy. He says that he just stands on the street yelling that to everybody who walks by. So when you hear that, then your entire state of mind changes. So instead of being angry with that person, you feel sorry for the person. And then you can just take whatever person, even if he continues to scold you and abuse you, you just take it with equanimity. Okay, so that's one of the ways of, or some of the ways of dealing with people who are provocative, developing loving kindness towards them, wishing them to be well and happy, developing compassion towards them, wishing them to be free from their angry and unwholesome state of mind, or just treating them with equanimity, not paying any attention to them. And then with regard to circumstances, especially objects coming through the senses, yeah, one would just regard them with equanimity. And one way to do that is just to regard them as being impermanent, things that arise and pass away. And you could actually turn them, if you're practicing insight meditation, you can turn them into objects of contemplation. Yeah, there's an important sutta that gives some techniques for dealing with problems in that way. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 28, the Greater Discourse on the Elephant's Footprint. And it's spoken by Sariputta. And it's actual advice for when people are provoking you. So what Sariputta says, when somebody is like yelling at you and scolding you and abusing you, what you do is just turn their words, their speech, treat it as just the sound element, the sound object. So you don't turn the sounds into meaningful words attacking you, but you just contemplate that these are sounds. These sounds arise in dependence upon the ear faculty, and the sounds strike upon the ear faculty. They give rise to contact, and through that contact arises feeling, and that feeling will give rise to a mental reaction. And so in this way, you contemplate the sound is impermanent, the ear faculty is impermanent, contact is impermanent, feeling is impermanent. And in that way, equanimity becomes established. And so you could do that with any of the senses. Yeah, using
Thank you very
impermanent.
much. Thank you very much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, we go on with some of the questions. Brenda in California. Brenda?
Yes, can you hear me, Bhante?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
I hope I can express my question to you well enough, but I recall having a conversation with someone some time ago about whether or not karma arises for an arahant. And the idea that negative karma, or what we perceive to be negative karma, arises for an arahant didn't fit with what this person was saying to me. But what I hear you saying in this sutta is that karma can continue to ripen, but the way it is received by the arahant is such that both his sila protects him from, or her from, acting upon any of these feelings that arise, and also that it's basically the difference is this concept of taints conducive to feelings.
Yeah.
So with an arahant, it's the karma can still arise. But then the second part of my question is, I think I've read that a Buddha, for example, someone can never kill a Buddha.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think I recall hearing or reading about an arahant who was chased by someone who was trying to kill them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm trying to understand this concept.
Okay. No, it does make sense. Okay, first, in the case of the arahant doesn't create any fresh karma, any new karma, because all karma, even good, what we call good karma, from a mundane point of view, good karma is rooted in ignorance and craving, even
Right.
the good karma. So with the arhat, all of the asavas, the taints, which are basically ignorance and craving, have been eliminated. So the arhat doesn't create new karma, but the old karma has the opportunity, will find the opportunity to ripen. That happens to regular arahants, and it happens even to the Buddha. So as I mentioned earlier, Buddha he experienced a backache, headache, he got ill from time to time, and he was injured by Devadatta. So those feelings that he was experiencing were produced by the ripening of old karma. Okay, so that is the case. And then in the case of the Buddha, it's like one of the principles is that it's sort of like, almost like you could say, a law of the universe, that a fully enlightened Buddha is not capable of being killed. Because it's, I think, part of the rule, sort of the fixed law of the universe, that a fully enlightened Buddha passes away sort of naturally, cannot be killed. But other arahants, it can be killed, even can be killed. And the one that, in the case that you heard of, was in fact Mahamoggallana himself, who was the second chief disciple of the Buddha. Because long ago, it said aeons and aeons ago, he had been, in one account, he had arranged for the murder of his own parents. And so that was one of the very heavy negative karmas. And because of that, he was reborn in the hell realm, experienced suffering for a long time. Then he came back to the human realm and went through many, many other births. But still, there was still a residue of that old karma that had not yet fully ripened. And that karma found the chance to ripen during his last existence. And so he was assassinated. Yeah, does that take care of the question?
It does. Could I ask just one follow-up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've had this thought that if someone's karma ripens, say someone's karma ripens when they're sitting in front of you, and your sila is protecting you from acting on that. My thought was that you could help alleviate someone else's karma just by not picking it up by your own sila. Does that make sense, or is that a not, or will that karma come to that person no matter what?
Yeah, I don't know whether I have that mystical ability to alleviate somebody else's karma, but normally each person has their own karma, maybe through, sometimes it's said that through sending waves of blessing with loving kindness and compassion that sort of ripples out across the world and helps to alleviate the suffering of people and sort of lightens the load of their karma. But normally people have to reap the results of their own karma.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so now we'll take Yong.
Bhante, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a quick question about Saramba. Is
Yeah.
it the same concept last week you translated into violence?
Yeah, it's the same word. It's the same word. Let's see how it works here. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, it seems that works better than undertakings. Though the commentary explained Saramba as simply, it glossed it with the word kama. Yeah, I didn't have a note on that. But I think something like violence would work better here. That's why when I was going through these passages, I said that I was not happy with undertakings. I thought it could mean transgressions or misconduct. It seems maybe violence, it would be too narrow a meaning in this context, but something like transgression or misconduct would work better.
Thank you.
Okay, and on phone.
Thank you, Bhante. Bhante, if the Arahat is free from condition, so what would make them produce the smiling chitta? Sorry, the smiling. Or is that like they still have delight in things because they smile?
I see.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, it said that arhats, first, it's not the case that arhats are free from all conditions. I mean, even everybody, every living being, even Buddha, is still subject to conditions. But arhats don't have defilements, but they could still smile. It said that arhats will smile. Well, first it said, this is in the Abhidharma, it said that there are two underlying reasons for smiling. One is from greed. So when you see something that you like, that you're attached to, or that you have a craving for, and when you're going to obtain it or it amuses you, then you smile. And that indicates the presence of some kind of craving or raga, some attachment. And then the other reason for smiling is knowledge or understanding. So when you understand something and you see it to be pleasant and agreeable, then you smile through that knowledge, through that understanding. So arahants smile through understanding, but not through craving or attachment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bante.
Okay, then Jnana Dhammiko. Jnana Dhammiko. Okay, you're unmuted.
Good morning, Bante.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for the time and opportunity. This is my experience. I hear one Dhamma talk. Please, Bante, advise how I can right understanding about this. The Dhamma talk say in the Parinibbana Sutta, Buddha said, who people practice ignoble path can attain noble person. In this case, we can say, we can say, and the people say the another religion can attain nibbana, or noble person if he to practice ignoble path. Is it right, Bante?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
The question is, is it true or no? If somebody, another religion, who practice ignoble path can attain noble person. The noble person is called Pacceka Buddha. Is it true, Bante?
I don't think one finds the Noble Eightfold Path in its completeness in other religions. Now, I'm not saying this to sort of bolster Buddhism as against other religions. I'm not really interested in trying to extol one religion as against other religions. But we have to consider, like, what are the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path? So you have to consider, does any other religion have right view as understanding the Four Noble Truths? Does another religion have right? Maybe other religions will have things that correspond to right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. But what about right mindfulness as the four foundations of mindfulness? So I think the four foundations of mindfulness, or the four satipatthanas, that is quite special and unique feature of the Buddha's teaching. So I don't think you would find in another religion the Noble Eightfold Path. But what is said is that during periods of cosmic history, when the Buddha's teaching doesn't exist, there are people who undertake the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. So they don't learn it, from a Buddha, but they discover it for themselves, and then they practice and they achieve enlightenment and liberation. And those are the ones that are called Pacceka Buddhas, or in Sanskrit, Pratyeka Buddha, which means an individually enlightened one. So one who attains enlightenment, but without dependence on the guidance or instruction from the Buddha. They don't practice within the framework of the Buddha's teaching, but on their own, independently, they discover the Noble Eightfold Path and follow it and practice it, and thereby they attain liberation. Yeah, so those are the Pacceka Buddhas. Okay, we could take one more question, then we'll have to stop, and that will be Rudy Dhammika.
Vandami Bante, I want to ask about the Pacceka Buddha. Well, how does someone make an aspiration become Pacceka Buddha? As we know about the Buddha, Sammasambuddha, he become Buddha from he start to make an aspiration, become Sammasambuddha, and then they fulfill all the parami, then he after the time is come, he become the Sammasambuddha. How about the Pacceka Buddha, Bante?
These are things that really lie beyond my own capacity. But just what is said in the commentaries is that there are people who have this aspiration. It's a bit strange to me to become a Pacceka Buddha. Maybe they just find that to be an inspiring ideal. And so they also have to practice the paramitas over many, many lives, not as long as it takes to become a Sammasambuddha. I think in the commentaries, it says that the minimum to become a fully enlightened Buddha is 4 incalculable periods and 100,000 great aeons. To become a Pacceka Buddha, it's 2 incalculable periods and 100,000 great aeons. But these are sort of things filled in by later generations. You know, we don't see this coming down from the Buddha himself, but filled in as later generations speculated about what are the requirements for this attainment, for that attainment. Okay, we're going to have to end now. And I'm sorry to say, but this will be the last sutta class before the winter. And during the winter break, I won't be having the sutta class. And first, next week is Christmas Day, so no class of any kind on Christmas. The week after that is New Year's Day, so we won't have a class, but BAUS will have an online New Year service, an interfaith New Year service. So if you want to join that, you go to the BAUS website and you'll find a link to that. And then the next weekend, through my other organization, Buddhist Global Relief, we'll be having a 3-day retreat to sort of welcome the new year. And the theme of the retreat is clarity, compassion, and courage. Myself and 2 other monastics from Buddhist Global Relief, the Bhikkhuni Aya Dhammadipa and the Bhikkhu Jin Chuan in California. So if you're interested to join that, you go to the website of Buddhist Global Relief. And then on Saturdays following that, I think it's starting January 15th, what we will do from 9:30 to 11:20, we'll have an extended meditation period, extended meditation session with 2 periods of sitting meditation and in between a period of walking meditation. So you'll be getting the announcements about that. And so each Saturday we join together for about almost 2 hours of meditation practice. Okay, so let me end by first thanking you all for joining us today. And then we will do the sharing of the merits. So I'll recite the verse for sharing the merits. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Dukkha Patachani Dukkha Baya Patachani Baya Soka Patachani Soka Hontu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we end with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3.
And bow to Bhante.
Okay. Oh, Carolyn is back.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Yes.
Sadhu, thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante. Happy New Year, Bante. We love you, Bante. Holiday.
Holidays, everyone.
Bante. Happy holiday.
Miss you.
Everyone. Be
Okay.
safe, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bante.
Bante.
Okay, so we'll have to end now.
Bante.
Okay.
Bye, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay,
Anumodana.
okay, bye-bye.